Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podCAST Iron. On this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. Today, I have the extreme pleasure of sharing with you a recent conversation with Kevin Vanek. I need to thank Kevin for being open to recording this interview, even though I gave him less than a week's notice. And right before sitting down to record, he had just driven hours to get home from an iron pour. So Kevin, thank you. And for all of you listening or watching, thanks so much for tuning in, and please enjoy. Hello.
Hey.
And Kevin, well, who the hell are you anyways?
I'm an artist, a sculptor, metal worker, educator. Right now, my official title is Foundry Director at University of North Carolina, Greensboro. So I'm kind of in a sort of a dream situation right now. Career-wise, yeah. So it's a really fun job just to be managing a foundry right now, but it's really giving me a lot of time to focus on my art and stuff. So I'm trying to grow as an artist myself.
And you just switched over to this position.
Yeah, I moved here in October of 2020. So right as like academia was starting back up after COVID quarantine. So I just sort of popped into a new place in a whole new, experience with relearning how to teach and stuff during that time. But yeah, so just shy of 2 years now I've been here.
That's fantastic. So we're gonna, as Jim Wade said last week, and I really liked it, we're gonna jump back in the way back machine. But just kind of like in this section, I kind of talk about your formidable years but your childhood, just kind of like trying to figure out where any artistic or like manual labor skills maybe came into play, or if you have maybe an inkling of where they came from, what you were exposed to.
Yeah. I feel like that's a constant question that I'm always asking myself too. It informs so much of your art, but there's so much, at least for me, there's so much of it that has come into it. And so trying to relearn where it maybe came from or something, but I don't know. I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and my family was all kind of extended family was more blue collar labor class, maintenance. My dad was a maintenance man and a maintenance director in the same apartment complexes that we grew up in. So, I mean, I kind of was surrounded by some tools, and I currently have my dad's toolboxes that he had when I was a kid, and I remember like looking at them as these massive forms that held all of these tools with all of this information in it. But so yeah, I sort of grew up thinking I was going to do something similar, just sort of, maintenance or technical wise.
Did you do any like tasks alongside him or fix anything? Like I bet he could fix anything with nothing.
I feel like it wasn't necessarily with nothing, but he definitely seemed to know how to fix it. I mean, it was very interesting growing up because, like I said, my dad he worked maintenance and was the director of maintenance in the buildings, like these high-rise apartment complexes that I lived in. So we lived in the apartments where he fixed everything. So if anything ever broke in the house, he exactly knew how to do it and had every piece of equipment and every tool needed, because that was the job, was that not only that place, but everyone's place.
Yeah.
So there was kind of like a mysticism, I think, to it. And I'm sure there's some photos that exist maybe on film somewhere of me like sitting next to my dad while he fixed something. But I think there was more of a mythos to it. Like, as much as there was a connection, there was definitely a wall, a barrier, I guess, between me knowing how to do any of that. So I always wanted to. So when I eventually got into being able to choose my own paths a little bit, I started focusing in on and all of that. Like I was in Boy Scouts and stuff, and just really took all that on as the idea of learning to do something, learning to do a skill, to be able to like challenge myself the same way. If a drain breaks, and how do you fix it?
And troubleshooting.
Yeah. I guess that, that as a kid, I was thinking about it while I was listening to Jim's podcast, or interview on your podcast, and thinking about it while I was listening, and kind of remembering these. I guess as a kid, art wasn't really driven as an option that much. I remember drawing and stuff, and like my friends being like, "Oh, cool drawing," or whatever.
Yeah, we'll put it on the fridge. Yeah.
My grandma did some like slip cast ceramic pottery things that she painted, and did some Bob Ross style paintings and stuff. But there was still a connection in how much of that I knew. But as a kid, I really liked making. My favorite school assignments were those shoebox dioramas.
Oh yeah.
Book report, you read a book and then you build like a shoebox diorama. Loved it. Single pound object sculptures in a diorama frame. So cool.
I wonder if that's a generational thing, because I know like into my core exactly what you're talking about. And my dad would help me with those. Like my mom would help me too, but my dad would be the one that was like with the dowels, helping me make the outside look like a log cabin. And like,
it was making those, and my dad introducing me to a hot glue gun.
Yeah.
That I think probably prompted the entirety of my making. Even to this day, you could probably everything. I could probably relate every piece of my artwork or every practice I do to a hot glue gun.
Yeah.
Just sticking stuff together.
That's wild. Cause I'm just relating now, and I'm trying to stay focused. So anyway, so that was kind of probably like, elementary school, middle school, adolescence sort of a thing. But then did that evolve in high school or?
A little bit. I never took any art classes after they were middle school or so, where it was just like art class time.
Yeah, everybody takes art.
High school. Yeah, I didn't take any more art classes. Again, I think art was never driven home as an option to me, as something to do. Never like kind of guided towards that creative side of me. And I was in Boy Scouts, and I had this plan to join the military. So, excuse me, by the time I got into high school, I joined ROTC.
Yeah.
Before I even started high school, like the summer after I after 8th grade.
Yeah.
I joined ROTC and just committed fully to that, and really re-altered my life into a different path at that point. But even in there, like after the first 2 years where you don't really have many electives, and you really ate all of those up. But then I started taking like small engine repair, which was very tinker and hands-on. And I was good at it. Without really having to try, which was nice, just I think because of enough of that information from my dad, my grandfather, and my uncle, all these working people. I was like, well, I have to put 100% into this.
Yeah.
So just putting in some effort made me pretty good at taking an engine apart and putting it back together and hoping that it worked after that.
Yeah.
But then that same teacher, I took welding with them. When I was in high school.
Okay.
And started learning welding. I remember I was telling a story recently to my welding class about the first welded sculpture I can remember making. And it was in this class, so relating back to those dioramas in that welding class.
In high school?
Yeah. I was past, like I finished my assignments fast because I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
I would just like weld the coupons needed for the grade. And then he'd be like, whatever, you can do whatever you want in here now, just like play around. And I had an English class that we had to do a book report on, what was that, Fahrenheit 451 or something?
Yeah.
So we had to do a book report on that. I did not want to write a paper.
So
I welded a sculpture together that was like a brick house or a cube house with like a spark plug guy and a ball bearing for a head. and then like wrapped a piece of wire on it.
Uh-huh.
So it was the guy spraying the like flammable
Uh-huh.
liquid that they sprayed on the houses to burn down all the books. And I put a kerosene soaked sponge inside of the metal house I made. And while presenting my book report, I lit it on fire and about got kicked out of the class.
I was going to say, was the teacher prompted before?
No. And I really should have. She was very terrified.
A kerosene soaked sponge.
Yeah, it went really, I had no way to put the fire out either. I had not thought that out. So there was just a big flame that I couldn't put out.
That might be the title of this episode.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was interesting.
So anyways, so after it was put out, how did the grade go for that?
Who knows? I passed the class. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
who knows? I think I got a good enough grade.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not the last time I've employed that practice of some academic class wants a paper. I don't want to write a paper. So I've made a metal sculpture and tried to pass that off as a research paper. So it worked enough, I guess.
Yeah. So then going or graduating from high school, and you're already handy with troubleshooting, fixing engines and welding and creating small sculptures, little dioramas, maquettes. Where does that kind of, did you go right into college? Or I don't know much about the ROTC program, and I'm sorry. So I don't.
No, that's all right. The long and short of it is I did not go into the military.
Mm-hmm.
ROTC was supposed to be my route. I had a full tuition
through
the military. My kind of life career was planned out by them. And then a couple months before I graduated, I had a seizure and they diagnosed me with epilepsy. And so I just sort of lost all of that. Like immediately the military didn't want anything to do with me. So lost all the scholarships and every plan that I had moving forward. So it was really a challenging time. And I ended up needing, like, I didn't know what to do. And I was kind of afraid of not going to college and then just getting stuck. Like I knew despite how much I cared for like the blue collar people in my life, I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. Like I needed something more than that. So I was afraid if I just stayed there, then I would end up just being a maintenance man and not necessarily taking my life somewhere else. So I ended up just latching onto a friend of mine in high school and just following him to college as a like whatever, just get me somewhere. So I went to a college I'd never heard of. I lived with a guy that I had been close friends with for maybe like 3 months. And just sort of landed into this college experience on a wind, literally. Yeah.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still had no clue what I was doing there. Like I had never really.
But you were 18.
Yeah, and I had never really researched jobs or career or thought about it because I literally made the choice at 17 or no 13 pre high school at like 13 that I was just going to let the military do with me what they wanted,
what they needed.
What they needed just so that I could pay my way into the future, I guess. So I knew I kind of enjoyed, I had like through ROTC and Boy Scouts and Eagle Scout, but largely in ROTC, I did a lot of leadership training. And I was the training officer for the unit in my final year. So I trained all the freshmen and everything coming in. And so I knew I liked helping teach people. So
and you were good at it.
Yeah. And I thought I was pretty good at it. Good enough that I didn't have to work as hard as I did for some other things like math. I didn't want to do. So I just sort of signed up for an education degree, like a bachelor's in education and going to be a teacher. And I thought I'd go to Japan and teach English as like a second language or something like, I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, sort of showed up in there and then got into these classes and hated every bit of it. Did not want to be a teacher or like the way they were doing it.
Yeah.
But because I ended up following my friend into college and living with him, He had signed up to live in this special dormitory area called the Arts Village. So I then had to sign up to be in the Arts Village to live in this dorm area.
Okay. Yeah.
And I happened to be living with for the entirety of my freshman and sophomore year on the floor of the dormitory that had all of the art students in it. So it was me, a couple other like random people, and then 90% art students. So they were always talking about art. And we had our own private room in the basement that was like a free to use studio space that we had 24-hour access to. So we'd hang out down there as like friends on the floor.
Yeah.
And then these other students would be working on their sculpture projects.
Yeah.
Or
that's a great resource to have in a dorm.
It was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. I credit a lot of my getting started with that place because, in there, people were making things and I was like, well, why don't you just go get a drill and use a screw and put that together? And they're like, what do you mean?
Oh, because they didn't have the background.
So I was able to help and then see that. And then I started making the very first sculptures outside of trying to just get an easy A in a book report. In that space, like with these people, I just started pulled out the hot glue gun, diorama style, and just started gluing weird animal bones together that I found on the railroad track while like walking.
Yeah. Just found materials.
Yeah. Just started making these weird creatures. I later called them bona fide art. Bona fide, but yeah, they just started hot gluing stuff together. And then that slowly led to me discovering that the sculpture department had welders.
And you were like, I know how to do that.
Yep. And then
probably better than.
Yeah. No. But I knew how to do that. And I liked that space, and they had forging and then through being a part, like around those people, I ended up that the dorm was right across from the art building. So one day I just saw them, they were pouring iron. Greg.
Oh,
and so then I was just like, I saw him. He came and gave an artist talk to the Arts Village.
Who?
Greg Mueller. He was my first sculpture professor.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a student of, I believe, both Wayne and George Beasley. But yeah, so he happened to be the professor there at the time and gave an artist talk to us and then showed all these pictures of fire and insanity. And then I saw it happening and I was like, great, I'm going to start taking art classes now. Whatever I got to do to get in there.
That's it. And that was when you were a freshman.
I think it was, towards the second semester, freshman year. I graduated that semester, or my first year, and the school put me on academic probation because I failed every class because I just didn't want to be there. Yeah. Then I signed into the arts department, was like, restarted everything and just, moved on from there.
Yeah.
It's very easy to have a really bad first year in college. For absolutely anybody.
Yeah. Especially if it sounds like your whole world was turned on its head from what you had been planning when you were like basically a child. It sounds like you decided ROTC when you were a child. And then that's kind of ripped out. Like that's like, where did it? So then you're in a sculpture class. Is it iron? How often was iron? Or was it once a semester?
I think at the time with Greg, it was like once a semester. We had a real big or a pretty big cupola that was a George Beasley design because that's where Greg went to grad school.
Did you mention the name of the college actually?
Oh, sorry. No, it's so this was in Bowling Green State University.
Okay.
In Ohio. Yeah.
Okay.
BG. Yeah. I guess rep for them, I guess.
Well,
but yeah, so it was great. It started with Greg Mueller for like a year. We poured iron about once a semester. We'd pour bronze, aluminum a little bit more frequently. But I was also doing classes with the head of the department there, Sean Moran, who was a stone carver. So I started doing carving with him. And so it was but even the sculpture classes were really well, like, oh, here's casting, it's an option, but we're going to do this instead, or here's what you're going to do. So it wasn't the most casting heavy, but definitely optioned. A lot of fabrication work too.
And kind of what I've found about it is like, it's not necessarily the intensity of the casting or the iron, but it's the wealth of knowledge that's available so that if someone tends to lean towards that or have an interest in that, all of the information to be successful is there. And I've found that the more I talk to people, that's kind of what shines through is the knowledge.
Yeah, I think there's never been an option, a point where I didn't have people who were willing to answer my questions. And it's the same kind of philosophy I try to put in my classes. Like, if you're here working and you want a question asked, like, don't apologize for asking a question. Just let me answer. I want to answer because you're working. But I really benefited. I think at the time was a really terrible thing. We all really, in my sculpture department, were really fond of Greg and attached to him and the knowledge he was giving us. And then he moved on from academia and is now a very successful private public sculptor. So great job for him. But then we kind of benefited, and Aaron Schmidt came in to BGSU as his first teaching job out of grad school. So it was that's when things kind of got just crazy. Aaron is Julia Schmidt's son, and so has been doing iron since he was literally a baby, and had just gotten out of grad school and was just full of this like post grad school wild energy, and he came in just, I don't know, kind of literally like volcanic erupted in the space. And we all of a sudden we were doing 6 iron pours a semester, and we had 3 different furnaces that we were running, and we were student cupola contest participants, and
of course
not wild stuff.
That's so. Had you gone to SLOS before?
No, we'd seen images of it. I think when I got into the sculpture program, my first year was in the dead year of the conference, in the year
in the off season.
And so then we kind of heard about it from the past season. And then it was, so that would have been, I guess, 2007. 2007 or something. Was the first one that I went to. And immediately
student cupola.
Such a good way to enter. Our furnace failed. We ran it at school and it ran beautifully. We built a continuous flow furnace, so it just had a perfect always stream of metal coming out. And then we took it down there, ran it, and we tried to reinvent the wheel on the furnace lining. And
while you were there?
No, when we built it, we couldn't afford all the refractory that we needed as students. So we had a hookup to get this 1-inch thick fiber board, that insulating board. So we put that in the furnace and then put refractory. Worked fine, but then the drive from Ohio to Alabama on a trailer cracked some of the refractory, and then iron got through to these boards and just melted right through it and burned a hole in the bottom of the furnace. I think maybe we got one ladle out of it, and then it was just like, it just melted to the ground, and we just stood there watching it.
Oh, your dreams melting to the.
So good.
I was going to ask if you thought it was something about the transporting, because sometimes I wonder about like all these furnaces we drag all around the country, and how much wear does a traveling furnace take versus a stationary one,
Yeah. Vibration affecting that.
So that's undergrad. So did you have 2 years with that spiciness?
I think I was there I did 5 years in grad school. And so I think I had that for 3 years, I guess. 1 year not doing art school, 1 year with my first professor, and then 3 years with Aaron.
In undergrad.
And then I went to grad. Then I wasn't sure what to do again, and decided to apply to like 2 or 3 grad schools only. Part of it, how much they cost to apply to, and what I had. And then I got accepted to East Carolina University. And so I went there.
I didn't know that. Until right now.
That was a 3-year program with Hannah Gibran and Carl Billingsley. So I really wanted to learn from Carl, having heard his name kind of mentioned within the greater mythology of iron. Because I heard all the time at the University of Georgia, they were always talking about ECU. I kind of came in the end of a peak era. Like, there was a ton of people behind me. And ECU had this really, really high point, probably while like in the timeline that I was in undergrad. So by the time I think when I got into grad school at ECU, the hype and the high energy and the kind of wildness that program had in its sculpture department was starting to decline. I graduated in 2013 and Carl retired in 2014.
Yeah.
So it was definitely kind of out of that like mega zone, but I still felt really happy to have gone there and to get a chance to be there. And it was still great. Like I learned a lot about iron. It was very interesting. My first semester there, Carl, who I went there to learn with, particularly his use of furnaces and using cupolettes for the first time. I'd only ever run cupolas. And then the first semester, I think one of Carl's kids was getting married. So he was just like, not going to be at this iron pour. See you later. And so I kind of had to take lead as first semester grad student because I had the most, at that time, the most knowledge on running furnaces. Like all the other students there had always run them with Carl. And none of them had necessarily run furnaces alone, which was something that Aaron really instilled in us. Like a furnace is just a tool. If you know what you're doing, you can do it. You can do everything on it. You can, if you just listen and pay attention. So yeah, the furnace in that first semester started to bridge across it because there was a ledge. They repaired the refractory and built a ledge into the inside. And so that ledge started to collect iron on its way down, which would chill and cold, and then it would just start closing across it. Cold iron freezing up inside of the furnace.
At what height in the?
Usually happens right above your melt zone.
Okay.
And that ledge was kind of right in the melt zone, so it was just enough to start creeping over.
Was it intentional ledge or it was like an accidental?
Well, it was an accidental. I mean, I guess.
Well, they repaired it.
When they repaired it, they didn't. Somebody wasn't necessarily thinking about it as a problem and just didn't chisel that ledge down or something.
Or smooth it out
Yeah. So then it just ended up holding. And so mid pour, like we start getting no iron.
Oh gosh.
Nothing's going down. Everyone's like, what's going on? And I go up on top of this thing and I can see this ledge inside. I can see it inside of it. And so I've got to kind of correct. And we just start throwing all coke in just to superheat the furnace. And I had to get one of those big basher bars and like be smashing the inside of this furnace while it poured. And all I could think was, I'm destroying Carl's furnace. It had his face on it, like a cast iron of his face on it. And I was destroying it.
I think I have a picture of it from when I was at SLOS one of the time. I'll have to send it to you so you can, we'll have to talk afterwards because I might have pictures from you from 2009. Because would you have been with them? No, it wasn't 2009.
I would have been there. I was with there in 11 and 13.
So it would have been 11 because 11 was my first SLOS.
Was that when we were pouring in the rain?
I don't even remember. I remember a lot of rain, but it rains every year at SLOS. There's always a huge rainstorm. Hopefully it's not always going to be on the night of all of the performances.
On every tour. Yeah, every performance. Tornado night.
Anyways. So that's a side thread. We'll connect on that later. But so then what else? Like this, I've been so excited all day because I get to talk to you about iron, about furnaces, about your trajectory, your art. Just, I guess I should like touch base with the questions and see where we're at. So we talked about how you're exposed to iron. We can talk about more like grad school specific things, or if you just want to talk about what drew you to continuing to use iron as an artistic medium.
Yeah. I mean, I could just keep talking about the path and if you want.
That's exactly what I want.
I mean, I was really thankful for the grad school experience still, just with how much iron I did get. We went to conferences, we traveled to pours. One of the greatest things, and let me step back and I just got back today from an iron pour.
Yeah.
I drove 4 hours this morning, got home, took like a 2-hour break, and then came to the studio to record this.
Well, thank you for, I didn't know that. And I hope
it was great.
Thank you.
It was great. Like I said, I listened to the podcast with Jim. And so it was really fun to leaving an iron pour and being able to listen to iron talk. So
yeah. Oh man, that's what it should have been. I should have named the podcast Iron Talk. Whatever.
No, the reason that I feel like I've poured 5 times this year already or something. Like we were trying to count, and I can't really remember, like once a month at least.
Wow. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I just had one at the end of last month here at the school, but it's great because there is this huge family and connection of furnaces in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Because of Carl, because of him being at ECU and passing his, not just enthusiasm for iron, but like his very unique take on it and how to run furnaces and how to project yourself in the public with these furnaces and how to be a spectacle while also being like safe and energetic and not throwing iron on the ground for no reason. Sorry to the people who do that, but
that's fine. I'll interview some of them later.
Yeah, great. I'm there too. but so that connection with Carl was there in grad school. Like we went places and Carl's iron students were all over the place. Like going to Sloss and seeing ECU family, Carl's students. Yeah. And they were at every school across, like they were everywhere. Yeah. And that still exists here now. And so I was really thankful for that. And I got to leave school actually on a really great high by building Carl a furnace per his design and request. That he's still using today. Like I actually got to pour on it for the very first time, I think last March or something. I never even got to pour with it after I built it.
Get out of here. Like,
yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I had enough, like Carl trusted me to build it.
Yeah.
While he had other things that he was doing and he knew he was retiring. So he wanted this furnace for whenever he was, retiring, we're retired. It was a clamshell design furnace. So it was a coupolette that was built in an octagon shape, so not a cylinder. And then it was seamed vertically. So top to bottom, it is bolted together with flanges of steel that go along the outer rim and bolt this thing together so that you can unbolt it and lay it down on its two sides on like flat in the back of your truck. So you can load it all into the back of the truck in pieces by, with like a small crane or a small dolly or engine hoist instead of needing a bridge crane or a forklift. But it was just a very, very pretty furnace. It still is very pretty.
Good.
It like really, a lot of what I projected or did outside of casting a lot of metal and learning a lot of mold making and stuff, I really took grad school to also learn the practice that Carl and Hannah Gibran were doing, which was steel fabricated public artwork. So I really invested a lot of time in taking those welding skills that I didn't have to work at a lot in undergrad because I was better than the people who had never done it. Yeah. And really saying, no, I want to be a good welder. Yeah. I want to know how to do this well and
structurally,
structurally, and still be aesthetically pretty, not just bird poop on a scene or something. So I took a lot of technical classes in the summer times in grad school. Benefit of a 3-year program is you really get to focus on craft and skill along with content. But I took these welding classes at the local community college while I was in grad school.
Oh, wow.
So really got to learn how to weld.
And they were welding specific, like for getting a welding certification, or were they welding iron?
Yeah. So they were doing certification welding and stuff, but there was one of the welding professors there had spent some time as the sculpture technician at East Carolina University.
Oh, okay.
A gentleman named Keith Kinlaw. So he was a fantastic welder, not an artist. And it was actually somebody that Carl, helped get hired. Because Carl was like, you know what? I don't really care if you're an artist. I need someone in this space who can fix everything that breaks. And welds better than me. And it was that. And so he eventually ended up outliving his job as tech and then went to become a welding professor at the community college. And then, so because he had this knowledge, what these sculptors were doing, he kind of crafted this special class in the summertime that was welding for artists. So it specifically was gold towards these ECU undergrads and grads. Also got a bunch of his, like, I'm here for a certification to be a pipe welder. Got some of those, like, fresh out of high school students to take this art class with a bunch of artists. So we learned how to weld things really well. And then he helped us create projects that kind of were guided towards our art. So I built a utility trailer that I've traveled across the country multiple times with this trailer, transported sculpture, transported my life. And it was all built in this, probably the only thing I built in grad school that still exists. But it was really great. So I was able to end ECU time building a furnace through the design of the person I'd just been learning, which really helped me to understand those furnaces, and do it in a very pretty fabricated manner that it's very aesthetically pleasing, and I still like to see it when I do. And then I left and went to a residency at Salem Artworks.
Okay.
I was up there for 2 or 3 months or something with Bones, Michael Bonadillo. And
I got to get him on. He's on the list.
Yep, he's great. So he was working as the I don't know what the titles there are, but like the foundry, the resident foundry artist. And so I came in as an emerging artist and residence in the foundry, and spent like 3 months out there with them. And midway through me finishing that and sort of thinking, like, maybe I'll just live here in the woods and help them here. I got a call from Aaron Schmidt, who had at this point moved on and was teaching out in Colorado. And they needed an adjunct, and he needed help in the sculpture foundry area. So he offered me a gig doing, I think I taught like 2 adjunct classes, managed the gallery space, and helped work and clean up in the studio in the foundry, and in exchange got to use the shop there, and got to work with Aaron again, which was really cool. So that was a year semester only of that. Would have loved to have stayed in that job and pursued it more and helped do some more work out there. But post graduating and student loans picking up,
I was thinking
all of this wonderful college experience that I got cost a lot of money. So
I'm with you.
I had to leave that and go get a real job, I guess. So I went and got a fabrication job doing metal fab in Colorado.
In that same area, or did you have to move
a couple hours away? I had to kind of leave that whole site. And then so I was doing custom metal work for rich high-end clientele in Telluride, like a ski town up in the mountains.
I think I've heard of it. I've never been to Colorado personally, but I've heard that rings a bell.
It was just very strange work. I mean, I took what I could get from it, and I'm very thankful of that time I spent there, because I, again, was given this opportunity to hone my skills in metal fabrication.
And taking order. And special orders, sort of.
I mean, most of it was like big jobs. Like some of these were like multi-million-dollar jobs. We built things for billionaires in their houses. So we would get these big architectural blueprints and then have to find these things. And then we'd have to do these test samples and all this crazy steps just to get approval to then start building something. And then be up in these crazy mansions being built in the mountains, putting in welding stairwells into stairs that have $100,000 worth of mahogany on them.
Wow. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Very cool, but very devoid of art or art of choice, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was very
Because
cool stuff that we made, but it wasn't.
it wasn't your art. It wasn't your design. You were on the fabrication team.
Yeah, a team of people that fabricated, relatively small crew too. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of stress that built up because jobs, like I said, $1 million jobs were kind of just placed on your plate. And it was like, figure this out, no stress, like make it perfect. And so it was very weird work. To love what you were making and to love the processes, but to hate everything else about it.
Yeah.
And eventually that ended up driving me out of it. And I ended up applying back in the academic circle, just gain access to Foundry again. And got a job in Mississippi, teaching adjunct teaching one class and working as the studio tech at University of Southern Mississippi. And that's where I was before here.
For years, right?
I was there for almost 5 years. Yeah. And it was in that time that I kind of, again, making the choice to go back into that academic circle or whatever. And I guess anything that you do, like if you're choosing to do it, you have to put 100% into it, right? Like you've got to just keep moving forward with it. So when I made this choice to go back into there, and I was like, okay, well, if I want to be here for metal casting, for Foundry, this is what I want to do. I need to invest more in it. And I was near enough to Birmingham that it was an easy choice to say, I'm going to join the steering committee for the national conference. I think that's when you and I really got close.
I'm trying to think. I feel like, I think it was that year that I was on the steering. The first was, it doesn't even really matter, especially, I don't know if the people listening, but I don't want to reminisce too much because that could get like boring.
No, I mean, and that could be a whole nother, that's an entire podcast in itself. Or maybe a special episode that is just reminiscing about sloths to people who've never heard of it. I mean, listen, if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know anything about the national conference at sloths and what is all of that, tune in for that special podcast. Yeah.
Or we welcome you to come in 2023, right? Probably, right? It'll be it'll be a year from now. I feel like
1 year, I guess, April.
About, a year from now. And I'm going to go as an attendee for the first time in like 6 years. I won't volunteer. I won't be on the steering committee. I won't be on the steering committee for the second time, but I'm really looking forward to enjoying as a participant. And
I'm sure I'll sign up for something, demo or workshop. Who knows? I'll end up doing something because I can't sit still.
Yeah. Maybe I'll do a live podcast on stage.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So then let's see, but I kind of want to, because I'm going to go back to the questions, but one of the things that I really want to talk about with every guest is the choice of the material of cast iron as a material that you're making your artwork with, because it's something that it's hard for me to explain. And it's really easy for me to say, well, I'm in love with iron and iron casting because of the people.
Yeah.
But recently, especially, I think because of the pandemic, and I've had to be away from it, but my love is still there. And it's evident in this growing collection of cast iron stuff. Like if I see anything that's a cast iron toy airplane or a cast iron weed burner torch tip, or
that sounds great.
Like it's just like the whole range of like anything at these antique shops or like a Goodwill or old tools that are cast iron. And so it's like there's something about the material, the history, as well as the people.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so multi-leveled. It's because there's so many answers to that question. Why iron? And having an answer to every one of them is not necessary. But it is. I mean, there's the people, there's a uniqueness to the people. There's a family that develops just by pouring with people, just by meeting other people who actively pour metal, or iron particularly, and know the labor and the sweat equity that has to go into it, but also knowing the history of it. I was just at this pour yesterday in Kingsport, Tennessee, pouring with Trip Jarvis out of Liberty Arts and Carl Billingsley. And Trip is one of Carl's students as well. And so we were standing there kind of like 3 iterations of this, Carl, an older grad, and me, and talking about this and kind of reminiscing on the history of cast iron in art in America. Iron casting as an art form is a particularly American practice. It is
fairly new.
Yeah. I mean, it's only 60 years old now.
Yeah.
Started in the 1960s. So we're still very new in this era that is iron casting. So it is a contemporary material, whether or not people look at it as a traditional material in like what you were talking about, like the cast iron object for purpose
from industry or
from industry or
household items.
Yeah. I mean, what spurred the cast iron art revolution being the not having access to these large industrial iron furnaces that were producing everything at the time, which is why we have so much cast iron stuff.
Yeah.
But then looking at that and saying, no, let's make that accessible to artists. And so I really look at that word particularly is accessible. At the time it was being made accessible to the individual who wanted it. But I think now one of the things that I really love about iron, outside of all the beauty of materiality and its nature to rust and its strength and all of that, is the accessibility of it. You can build a furnace that is 2 feet tall if you need it to be 2 feet tall. If you need a furnace that pumps out 10 pounds of metal at a time so that somebody with a disability can access that pour floor and pour metal, then you can make that furnace. You can make that happen. And I think even now in the last years, I mean, when the conferences that we were on were both themed towards taking the iron community and expanding it to a broader audience, to removing any barriers that we can find. And that's kind of how I see iron. It's cheap, it's affordable, it is fun, and you can manipulate the practice of making it in so many ways to make it. You could do it in a backyard. You could do it with 10-year-olds with parent signatures. But I do a lot. That's where I've started to see it more. I feel like I've gone through iterations of thinking that the best thing about iron is X, Y, or Z, materiality, nuance, history. And right now I'm really enjoying it as an accessibility tool, particularly within the program that I'm in now. UNCG has not had iron for many years here. They weren't an iron program. The professors here were not iron artists. Coral Lambert actually came out here and built the furnace that exists here in 1998 and built the furnace and did a like visiting artist thing, and they ran it a few times, and then eventually either I don't know if the university maybe shut them down for health and safety, or they just decided, you know what, it's not worth the hazard or the effort. And so I'm kind of restarting it. So I just did my first pour here, UNCG's first pour in a decade, last weekend. And I rebuilt the furnace that was here and rebuilt all the tooling. And I modified a bunch of stuff, and I rebuilt our pour floor so that I could get every student that I had out there. It was very awesome to hear so many students saying how great it was that they could lift the ladle. Because it was a smaller furnace, and how they didn't have to climb a ladder with 50 pounds of metal in their hand to charge the furnace, because it was made real low and it only took 25-pound charges. And so I was really happy to see iron become available to these students who maybe 20 years ago wouldn't have had access to it.
Otherwise. And it's interesting because I the University of Georgia, which I came out of, didn't have iron anymore that I know of in Athens, Georgia. And there are other people that I'll talk to that, their maybe iron program kind of, ran its course. But I try and remind those people who are kind of mourning the loss of so many of these programs that kind of like dwindled down or were extinguished, or however you want to say it politely, but they just know more.
Yeah.
But I tell them, but there's plenty of us that learn from those programs that are going out and starting an iron program up somewhere where there wasn't one before. And so it's kind of like the, when a door closes, a window opens cliche thing, but it's like, but the spirit is always there, and it's just going to different places. And the more different places it goes, the more people are exposed to it and get a chance to see what it's all about. And that's, I think, amazing that we're still in it.
And like we were saying, it's still relatively new in history. I mean, 60 years of doing this one thing. And it used to be that it was one person doing it. And then 3 people doing it. And then now it's expanding, and maybe now it's just the time, like maybe it does leave academia. Maybe it just now, like, it's headed out. Like, I know so many people that are pouring furnaces at artist residencies, centers, local spaces, people that are building out their own careers now based on pouring iron for the community.
Or for commissions, or because big foundries, industrial foundries, aren't necessarily wanting to do one-offs. And I mean, I don't think it's leaving academia. I think it's like expanding from academia. But I think that's what you meant.
Expanding outside of just being an academic. So many people that know it now.
And it's wild to me because in my daily life, I'm not exposed to iron casters or anything like that. So I'll talk to them and it's very mysterious. And I'm like, but when I go to like the fire conference in Memphis, almost everybody that's there knows how to make a sand mold. It's like, there's this knowledge that it's just been transferred through academia and conferences run by academics. And then, it's really cool. And I'm really glad to be a part of it. And I'm glad to now be able to record these and document it so that we can track
hear it again, track the history,
track our progress. And
there's been some great things done in relation to this. Like, I love the recorded history of iron, the foundry family tree.
Oh yeah. I was like, what? There's a recorded. Yeah. So Gabe Akagawa.
Gabe.
So if you're not familiar, but you're listening and you're interested, Gabe Akagawa does the foundry tree, and you can just find it by Googling it. And so he's a iron foundry artist himself. But he's been coming around to iron pours and photographing us in the community for years. I don't even know. I'll have to have him on and ask him when he started.
2007, I think, was the first year I went. 2009, whatever. I got my photo taken there. Like, it's just great.
I remember, this is like a side silly little anecdote, but I remember I was in grad school, but I needed to write my professor Jimbo. His last name is Bonacorsi. And I was like, heaven forbid I spell his name wrong. And so I Googled him because I knew, like most artists, they have a presence on Google, even, that was probably in 2010 or 2011. But the first image that showed up was him in his leathers, holding his helmet, and with this like clean white backdrop. And I was shocked. Like, I was like, was he on a magazine cover? This is insane. And it was because Gabe Akagawa had documented him. And but I just remember being so thrown off by that. And then it wasn't until years later that I actually got a chance to be photographed by Gabe. And it was really a proud moment for me to be able to be recorded in the history, like my face with my leathers under my professor's name as like, carrying the torch.
Yeah.
And so I love that also. And I'm glad you mentioned it because we got to talk about that.
Yeah. It's such a good resource. I mean, I'm thankful to have the connections I have in the family tree. And now, and now I have students who have been photographed and are in that now underneath me. So that's kind of another
so cool.
Interesting.
That's
the progression of it all.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to take a group of students next to the next national in April. And I'm hoping I'll have a group of students who are motivated and want to build a furnace and try to run it there.
Yeah, you will. It's gonna be, and I can't wait to see them. Are you gonna be at Fire Conference in Memphis?
Yeah. You going?
All right.
Great.
I'll see you there. That's because I think we've been going for about an hour. And so I really, so that would be probably the last two kind of questions I like to do is the hot on the horizon. And then any advice that you would have. So hot on the horizon, one thing is fire, but it sounds like you've been on fire this whole time, pouring this many times, just coming back from an iron pour yesterday.
Yeah. A lot of iron pours going on. I've been very happy to be back in North Carolina and be surrounded by so many pours. So I'm very thankful. I'm starting to expand that even more. There's a place out here that I'll mention while I've got a listener's ear. Western North Carolina Sculpture Center in Lenore, North Carolina is a new space that's opening up, and they've got I think at the end of summer, they'll have like 100 sculptures on site. And they just started an iron residency program last summer that I was a part of. And so that's happening in June. So right now my goal is to try to come up with an idea to make a mold and take out there and spend a couple days before the iron pour and button up a mold and pour with them and hang out at another iron pour. I've started doing some interesting experiments that you'll get to see the results of at Fire.
Oh, good.
But I'm trying to, because I now am as foundry director, I've rebuilt furnaces here. I've built smaller furnaces for accessibility of students, but also now I'm really loving being able to pump out like 20 pounds of metal every now and then. So at the last iron pour I did here, I was really able to trust the team of people I had here to help me because I've been pouring so much with them recently. So I did some special molds where I poured iron and bronze into the same ceramic shell mold at the same time and created some castings that are fusions of two different metals, not alloys. They didn't mix together. They genuinely just met each other and fused.
I feel like I saw some of these on Instagram.
Yeah, you probably, if you look on my Instagram, you'll see them. I don't know if they're in a post yet or they've probably just stories and disappeared, but I'll post them in a post one day. But they're very interesting. So right now I'm enjoying getting into some fun experimentation with foundry, being mixing, being comfortable enough to just start playing around with stuff. Like what happens if I pour bronze and aluminum into the same mold? I don't know. I'll give it a shot though. And see little things though. Bronze is really expensive right now. But I've also self-promotion a bit, I guess.
It's time. It's time for that.
I've been invited to be the featured metal artist at Firefest in Starworks in Seagrove, North Carolina.
In where?
Seagrove, North Carolina. Starworks is an artists collective, and they do this event. It's not a collective. I don't know what they're called officially though.
An artist group.
An artist group of an organization, a business. But they do this event every year. I just got to go to it for the first time this past April, called Firefest.
I've seen it advertised on social.
We did an iron pour. They had glass blowers there. Some friends of mine that I knew from Bowling Green State University's glass blowing program were there, and they were making these glass vessels, and we were pouring iron into them. And they have this huge giant kiln that they build with a giant ceramic piece, and then they open it up and it's on fire. It's very cool, but so I got asked to be the featured artist. So I'll be doing a show out there.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So I'm just
Good
trying to
job.
produce a bunch of work,
Yeah.
new sculptures, so that I can
Yeah.
have some work to show for that.
Yeah.
Like that thing back there that none of your viewers can see.
Oh, oh, I see it. I see it.
What was that last question?
What's some advice or points of advice that you have for young iron casting artists or anybody in the community? Anybody that's listening that you could just give them?
I probably mentioned it in this. I think one of my favorite things, particularly with iron, is the amount of work that it takes to make happen, and then the immense amount of gratification that leads to. Even if a casting doesn't work, or even if you break it while you're opening your mold or something, like, it's so easy to have that happen, and have that affect your outlook on the whole thing. But if you just look at the work necessary and know that the outcome is going to be there. Casting iron is hard work, but it's such a great rewarding activity to take part in, and to get your art outlet into. Yeah. Do more cast iron.
That's great. Thank you. Well, so we've been going for, I think, about an hour, a little over an hour. So we're going to switch over to the after show, which, for those of you who don't know, the after show is just a little 15 to 20 minutes extra where Kevin's going to pick a question from the end. Let's see. So some of the questions are: where's your favorite place to pour iron? Your favorite iron memory, the worst thing that's ever happened to you at an iron pour, the most scared you've ever been at an iron pour, or a funny story. So do you think you have anything specific that you want to tease about the after show that you want to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, I love mold. So let's talk about some favorite molds.
Oh, right. I love I love mold too. I can't wait to talk about it. Okay. So everybody, thanks for tuning in so far. And if you're on Patreon, we'll see you over at the after show.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye, everybody. That's just say bye. Thank you so much for tuning in. For me personally, learning about how Kevin got his start as an artist in the iron casting community and hearing about his art journey so far has really added fuel to my excitement about recording more of these conversations with other members of our community. Thanks again, Kevin, for being a good sport as I get this podcast off the ground. But also, thank you for being an active and inspirational artist. And I'm really looking forward to see how your program's student community grows and what your current iron casting explorations evolve into. If you want to follow Kevin on Instagram, his handle is Kevin_, the letter N, _ stuff. And you can also visit his website, which is kevinvanek.com. If you like what I'm doing here and you want to support the podcast, then go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/podcastiron, and choose a contribution level that fits within your budget. Of course, as was already mentioned during the interview, all Patreon supporters at any level get access to the after show recording. The after show is just 15 to 20 extra minutes with the show's guest, and in this episode's after show, Kevin and I talk about mold making specifics and aspirations for iron-related tattoos, just to name a few of the topics. So for as low as $1 per month, you can support the show and get this extra content. And believe me when I say that even $1 makes a difference when it comes to paying for the hosting and dispersing of these interviews publicly. If you don't have it in your budget to support the podcast on Patreon, but you still want to help out, then sharing this with someone who you think will be interested is also a huge help. Anyone you know in the cast iron art community, just send them the link because everything will help. And for that, I say thank you so much. If you want to get in touch with me, say you want to be interviewed or you have an idea about someone else you think I should interview on the podcast, you can send me an email at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. But that's it for now. So thank you again for listening. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. Bye.